The Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service has been dedicated to educating Texans for over a century. In 1915, the Extension Program was established under the federal Smith-Lever Act to deliver university knowledge and agricultural research findings directly to the people. Ever since, AgriLife Extension programs have addressed the emerging issues of the day, serving diverse populations across the state. Texans turn to Extension for solutions in horticulture, agriculture, 4-H and youth, and family and consumer sciences. Extension agents respond not only with answers, but also with resources and services that result in significant returns on investment to boost the economy. Join us Fridays at 1 o'clock for the AgriLife Extension Hour. Today on the AgriLife Extension Hour, we will be featuring the Agricultural Toolbox with host Mike Heimer.
Good afternoon. I hope everybody's having a good day, and hopefully the rainfall we've been talking about for several days will finally come to fruition. We'll catch a little bit, settle the dust, and like I said, get things maybe greening up a little bit before they go dormant for the season. Today I thought we'd talk a little bit about a variety, several different topics, but the biggest thing is, in light of all the activity going on across the state and nation, the presence of fire. It can be very destructive, and at the same time it can be a beneficial tool, and that's what we want to kind of talk on both sides of the issue today. And again, the fact that there is some prevention type of activities we can utilize and implement around our home and our barns, and at the same time it is a very effective tool that we can use in our land management techniques, whether it be timber, pastures, whatever the case might be. Fire or some mechanical work are effective tools at keeping that land productive. Many times, people just think, well, we'll do nothing, and that's the best thing to do. But most times, if you drive around the country, you see land that, has had no management techniques implemented, and at that point in time, it's basically useless as far as wildlife, agricultural production, and a variety of things. So, again, there's some ways to look at it, and there's some tools that we can utilize. Today, I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the preventive type activities we can do around our home. And our sister organization with part of the Texas A&M University system is the Texas Forest Service. And Mr. Ben Plunkett is with us today. He's our local forester located down there at state office, their main office down 1488. But the Forest Service is very active in working with timber owners and landowners, and as far as ways that they can do to manage their property, whether it be the dwellings, homes, barns, things like that, but then as far as the land itself. And he and I were going to visit a little bit, but I thought I'd ask him to talk a little bit about what we call the FireWise program. It's an educational emphasis that the Texas Forest Service has implemented several years ago, but it's an educational process to let homeowners and landowners think about what they're doing around their home, whether it be an existing structure or if they're building a new structure, the things that they can do around that home to make it less likely to have, if it should encroach the yard, things like that from a neighboring fire, no matter what the case might be, to lessen the chances that that home might become a victim of fire. So, Ben, if you'd share some ideas about the FireWise program and what landowners can think about when they're either planning or redoing a home, and landscaping and things like that might do around the house.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. One of the things that we run into, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, is that landowners and homeowners like to leave things what they consider natural, and they might just want to leave the land how it is, and that's not necessarily beneficial. And you mentioned that earlier, especially for wildfire, when you get things like Yopon and some other fuels, and for those of you that don't know, fuels is basically anything that can burn. When that starts kind of encroaching on the house, it's an immediate danger to your home, and it allows the fire to spread and get within the vicinity of your house. So one thing that we recommend doing is clearing any fuel from the house, and anything like flower gardens, flower beds, ornamental plants that you have near your house, removing those. And we like to say you can remove them for up to 30 feet. And you could even give yourself more of a buffer zone from that 30 to 50 feet from around your house. And we're not talking about big 100-year-old oak trees. Those aren't necessarily a concern as long as you have some kind of break between those and the lower fuels that allow the fire to get up into the larger tree canopies.
And even some things, right now with the dry weather, there's a lot of needle cast and leaf drop going on top of the homes. How can that affect, if you'd have a fire in the area, all that material laying on a roof line?
Yeah, absolutely. And, One thing to consider is you should always keep that clear, because these fires, when they're coming through, they can cast embers a long way from the head of the fire. And those embers could be floating 100, 200 foot in the air and then fall down, and you have fuel for those. So I definitely recommend keeping your roofs clean and free of any kind of debris that you can.
Mm-hmm. And again, this year was kind of an interesting year because we had excessive amounts of rainfall all through the spring, through Memorial Day weekend. We're looking at excessive rainfall amounts, and did see a lot of plant growth all the way through the early spring, and then all of a sudden it turned off bone dry. So that basically increased our fuel load tremendously around homes and out on properties, and that kind of just heightens the situation there where it could take off. And we've been blessed not to have too many fires in our particular area, but that is something that take off. As far as the landscape, then is there like a few feet on shrubbery, things like that around from the base of the home that you recommend, or just everything that 30 foot out, or what do you kind of think on that?
No, and you can have plants that are a flower bed, for instance, that is up to your house. I don't recommend getting anything above a few feet, we'll say window height, that can extend those flames in the top of the canopy. Now, it is the most beneficial if you do not have any kind of woody plants or flower beds directly adjacent to your house. So, I mean, grass, especially manicured grass is the best way to go. But no, as long as you don't have shrubbery, and things like that are right up next to the house, you can have small, short flowers, we'll say 1 foot in height, but I wouldn't plant any big, tall shrubs around.
There you go. And again, we've got a real teaching opportunity. The Forest Service is responsible for the management and upkeep of the Jones Forest that you guys drive by on 1488 on a regular basis. And that particular piece of property, it is an educational opportunity. It is something that's dedicated to woodpecker preservation, but at the same time, it's an excellent teaching opportunity there for people to drive by. And the land management techniques that you guys implement on that property. If you talk a little bit about the strategy as far as when you look at fire, when you look at just kind of understory control, how often we would need to do that on a piece of property?
Right. Well, first of all, the Jones is a very unique state forest because it is in the middle of a highly urbanized area. And the red cockaded woodpecker drives the management activities on the Jones. So prescribed fire plays a huge role in the management of vegetation on the Jones. The reason for that is because the red cockaded woodpecker loves a clean understory where it can use as a foraging area to collect food and things like that. And the other thing that it needs is it needs old, mature timber with the heartwood rotted out slightly so that it can go in and it actually builds its cavities in living trees. So the Jones is the right habitat. So the way that fire plays into this landscape is it actually kills off some of the woody vegetation, and the grasses are adapted to respond quicker to fire. So when we use prescribed fire, we actually go in and we burn out some of the woody vegetation. Of course, it burns grasses and things, but it kills the woody vegetation off, and then it allows the grasses to reestablish. And it just knocks back the successional stage. So when we're talking about plant succession, basically if you look at a landscape 100 years in the future, it's the change of vegetation over time. So we use fire as a tool to prevent it from going on to the next stage. So you could have grasses, which would be like a primary successional stage, and then go into your smaller shrubs and things like that. So right now we're kind of on the transition, and every time that we use fire, we actually knock it back from the shrubby stage to allow the grasses to take over. Okay.
So what kind of rotation do you guys try to implement down there as far as whether it be fire or mechanical, understory plant material?
Sure. So it really depends. There's usually, I guess our target for red cockaded woodpecker areas is about 2 years. Okay. If we can burn it annually, we do. We do have a lot of challenges. Now, there's also other tools that we use for areas that don't receive the fire frequency that we would like. Mechanical, such as mulching, we go in and we actually set back the successional stage that we talked about earlier, and we get in and chop some of the woody species down with our mulching machines. And then herbicide is a good tool. The thing about mulching and herbicide and fire as well is they don't work as just one treatment. It's something that you have to continuously go back to. So if you just spray herbicide on it, you really didn't do any good if you don't follow it up with a mechanical treatment or with fire or just something. You can kill the woody species, but if you don't keep knocking back the successional stage, it'll come back to exactly what it was before.
Like a lot of folks have got white-tailed deer on their property, and they're trying to focus on habitat enhancement for that, and what kind of rotation on the yopon if we're trying to get regrowth, keeping it that 2 foot tall at the extremes so that there's a lot of young tender vegetation there. How would we try to manage that so we keep that kind of plant material present?
Well, for white-tailed deer, and I think you have tons of options because deer are a very diverse species, and keep in mind they are an edge species, and one thing that it's good to have a diverse habitat there, so you could have an annual burning frequency in some areas where you keep a lot of grasses and forbs on the ground, and then you could have areas that you never burn, that have just a little bit, you have more mass-producing trees and things like that in those areas, and then you could have something on more of a 5 to 10 year fire frequency where you do get a little bit more browse material, but not so much. I think that with white-tailed deer you can just have any kind of fire frequency, and it's probably best to have just about every kind of fire frequency, whether it's 1 year or never returning fire to the ecosystem.
And when you just mentioned you were out west helping fight some fires out that way, if we and again we're getting calls on this on a regular basis. If a person was trying to manage some habitat to enhance, say, a quail population, ground birds, how can we manage those transition areas you're talking about between timber and grassy areas there to try to keep that habitat low and bunchy so that those birds might try to establish some habitat in this area or exist in the habitat we could provide, and what would be the ideal habitat and management they could provide, landowners could provide.
Well, for quail, for example, and they're kind of different here. They've left East Texas pretty much, but we actually have seen or heard some quail on the Jones. So there, our 2 year fire return interval frequency seems to be working well on the Jones. They do like to have the grassy understory, but then they like some of the shrubbery that does come up at the 2 year. And South and West Texas, it's a little bit different. I would say the more that you could put fire in the ecosystem, it would probably be better, because you're going to have areas that just naturally don't burn anyways. So yeah, I would say the 2 year, maybe more on the 5 year frequency, because the vegetation there isn't exactly adapted like it is here to respond to a fire as quickly. So you might have some shrubbery that comes up a little bit later. But no, probably the same here. I would say a 2 to 5 year frequency.
Okay. And again, this line here, like I said, the fire is a tool. And if you'll go back and even look at, the history as far as ecology and the way things have gone, fire is a natural occurring management tool that Mother Nature has utilized over the centuries. And there's a stigma that it's a bad a tool to utilize, and I don't know if it's a fear or if they're just seeing destruction, but it is something. If it's used properly, it is a very valuable land management tool, and it'll keep invasive species and trouble species out of the way and try to maintain a habitat that we really want to focus on. And again, all throughout the country, and the fuel load is a big management problem that we've got to look at. And after we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit about that fuel load management and maybe on the pastures, but then also I want to visit a little bit with you as far as the role Forest Service plays. You guys are a major player in firefighting
Absolutely.
Throughout the country, so we want to let folks know exactly what you guys do.
You are listening to the Extension Hour on irlonestar.com.
SPCA PetSnap of Montgomery County is a 501c3 all-volunteer-based rescue and adoption organization with a no-kill policy for healthy and adoptable animals. Our name states what we believe: Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. People eliminate the suffering. Spay, neuter, adopt, please. We rescue abandoned, abused, or homeless animals, do whatever is needed to make them healthy and happy, and then we find them loving forever homes. We envision a county where every companion animal finds a permanent and compassionate home, where communities are enriched by the special bond between people and animals, where cruelty no longer exists, and where every home practices responsible pet ownership. You can contact us at www.spcaofmc.com. the SPCA PetSnap of Montgomery County encourages you to think adoption first.
The Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service has been dedicated to educating Texans for over a century. In 1915, the Extension Program was established under the federal Smith-Lever Act to deliver university knowledge and agricultural research findings directly to the people. Ever since, AgriLife Extension programs have addressed the emerging issues of the day, serving diverse populations across the state. Texans turn to Extension for solutions in horticulture, agriculture, 4-H and youth, and family and consumer sciences. Extension agents respond not only with answers, but also with resources and services that result in significant returns on investment to boost the economy. Join us Fridays at 1 o'clock for the AgriLife Extension Hour.
Heaven's Army of Resources and Recreation Center is a 501c3 nonprofit organization featuring a 10,000 square foot building located at 19325 FM 1485 West, New Caney, Texas. At Heaven's Army, we offer over 26 different services free for all ages, from karate, dance, drug and alcohol classes, anger management, parenting, food and clothing pantries, to just name a few. We are supported solely by volunteers and private donations. Our main mission is to glorify God in all that we do. At Heaven's Army, we strive to be a hand up, not a handout. Come check us out at 19325 FM 1485 West, New Caney, Texas, or call for more information at 281-689-5864. You may also learn more about Heaven's Army by visiting our website at heavensarmyofresources.com.
All righty, welcome back to the Toolbox, and this is Mike Heimer along with Mr. Ben Plunkin from the Texas Forest Service visiting with you today. And Ben, we were talking about a variety of things, but I want people to understand how the Forest Service is a very important part of the A&M system. And everybody thinks that the Forest Service just operates the Jones Forest and maybe works with a landowner or two along the way. But I think, if you explain a little bit, particularly about that headquarters over there in College Station and the instrumentation and the resources that are there to help with firefighting management and working with landowners across the state. But, that office over there in College Station is tremendous, and the resources they've got there and how they can spot what's going on.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And, I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to a lot of fire departments if I didn't mention this first. So one of the major roles that our agency plays, and this is kind of overlooked, is that we work hand in hand with fire departments, whether they're volunteer departments or if they're paid departments. And we do whatever we can to get them the equipment and PPE and things like that they need to fight these fires. And those guys are really the first ones on the scene. And they know through us building a relationship with them that they can call us in. And at that point, that's kind of where we come in. So the volunteer fire departments or paid departments respond to the scene initially, and then when they need extra equipment and things like that, they come in and usually we work together with these departments. As far as College Station goes, man, that is an awesome place to go. Just some of the technology that we have there, satellite thing, and it's way above my head, a lot of that stuff. But just the tools that they use to predict these fires and things as far as sand tables to predict fire movement and spread, and some of the computer models that they use that compiles things, historical data and fire weather and behavior, and they can look at the conditions and really predict what kind of fire that we're looking at coming up or, future conditions. Another thing that we use is we have air detection, and we've had some fires lately where our airplanes have flown over and a volunteer fire department or a paid department hasn't responded to the fire yet, and our plane picked it up and we responded first to it. So we play a large role, but we're hand in hand with these departments around here, and we try to build really good relationships with them and just work together. So, kudos to both the Forest Service and the volunteer fire departments. Yeah,
it's basically a strong team effort there, and
absolutely.
And like I said, you guys are able to monitor what's going on, and that's what I've seen in the past. Several instances where they weren't aware of a fire out there in a remote area, and then you guys were able to pick up on it and direct some resources over there to help contain that. As far as resources that you've got down here at the Jones Forest Office, and the dozers and things like that, can you share a little bit about, as far as how those and when those are utilized and how they might be utilized to help assist a local fire department or a volunteer group out fighting a fire, or a landowner?
Sure. Well, we don't do a lot of work for private landowners anymore. But as far as on a fire, our dozers, the volunteer fire department, are a paid department. I keep kind of mixing those words up. The fire department responds first, and they get in, and you just never know what the conditions are going to be. If there's something that they can't handle with the equipment that they have, they'll give us a call, and we'll bring our dozers in. And basically what we do is we scrape the soil down just to bare mineral soil, and it prevents fire spread. And we have a lot of different tactics that we use for that. But really, we just try to go in and surround the fire with mineral soil and keep an eye on it and help support those guys. Gotcha.
And as far as the kind of lead time, what you guys are spread thin. I know you're being called in lots of different directions. So what kind of lead time when they let you guys know, or I guess you're in the middle of planning or responding all the time, but if a situation like the Walker County fires the other day, how long does it take to get those resources out there to assist those guys? Well,
from the time that we get a phone call, it's really dependent. And in times where we're not having frequent fires, we're not quite as prepared. Not to say that we're not prepared. The Forest Service is always ready to go when somebody needs us. But let's just say like this spring, we're having a lot of rainfall, and if we mysteriously had a fire that came up, it might take us a little longer. We're on a 30-minute response time. From the time we get the phone call, we're ready to go and leaving the office within 30 minutes. Now, lately, when we've had some increased fire behavior and fire weather, we would get a phone call and we'd be gone in 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. Now, time of arrival, that depends on where the fire is, but if we're having a lot of fires and we know it, we can be out within just a few minutes.
And in the past, you guys have helped. As far as instead of going that way first, as far as the activity that goes on there and up at the Sam Houston National Forest and that management that goes on up there, as well as Jones Forest on that fire, how do they dictate how much of an area they're going to burn in those big areas up there? Working with those guys, and I know they got some different techniques, and it'd be middle of summer, so it's kind of, if folks scratch their head and say, they're burning when it's seems like it's very dangerous, but yet they know what they're doing, and when they set it off, they know exactly where it's going to go and how long it'll last.
Well, and I think that one thing that people don't understand about prescribed burning is that we're not just going out there and throwing fire on the ground. We have a prescription for it, and we have some very highly trained and highly qualified individuals that they set a goal, and they know exactly what they need to do to get that goal. So on the Jones, for example, our goal is to have a grassy understory, and so our burn boss will develop that plan. And he knows the exact weather conditions. Your wind speeds need to be X miles per hour. Your smoke needs to lift this high, and this is how you need to light the fire. And they actually kind of base the ignition patterns off of what they need to accomplish too. As far as the Sam Houston, they do things a little bit differently than us. Smoke management is a major concern for the Jones State Forest. The Sam Houston. Of course, they are concerned with smoke management, but they're a little bit more remote, and so they have some better options. And they set their objectives, and they burn to accomplish their objectives. And if they burn in the summertime, then that was in their objectives, because the Texas A&M Forest Service and the USDA Forest Service. We've got some of the best guys in the world when it comes to burning. And so if you do see them out there burning in the summertime, they're not just lighting it on fire. They have something in mind, and it's for a purpose. But they do a lot of large scale burning on the Sam Houston too, where they're lighting off thousands of acres at a time. And at the Jones, we normally don't do that big of burns. Our burns are going to be less than 100 acres, and a lot of times we might burn 5 acres or 15 acres. Just depending on the conditions and what we're trying to accomplish. But they've got a little bit more land to manage and have the luck, I guess, that they can put a little bit more smoke in the air. and so they get a lot bigger burning done.
There you go. Well, let's go ahead and transition over into, you're right, actually, what you mentioned a minute ago, the prescription, planning that burn, and as far as you've got a goal. And like you say, we don't just go out there and touch off grass. We don't throw down a match and say, this is what we're going to do. Today I woke up and I want to burn my pasture off. And, that's not the case at all. That, we actually, a goal is there. And what that accomplishes, if we buy a piece of property there and it's been vacant for several years, tremendous amount of vegetation out there. It's such that it can't be shredded, and a lot of saplings are growing up in the middle of this. If it was a hayfield or a graze field at one time, but how we would sit there and look at this piece of property, our perimeters, if we got natural barriers, and then also where the existing homes are at. You'd mentioned smoke and keeping it off the highways or keeping off of a neighboring property because town, but even a neighboring house, we can't put smoke on them. But talk a little bit about as far as the that planning process that we go through when we sit down with a landowner and anybody that's wanting to do a burn. That process that you go through. Say, okay, what's the objective, and then what kind of conditions will we need to be looking for and planning for, because like I said, you've got to wait for those conditions to be just right as far as the right wind, humidity levels, temperatures, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And the first thing when I meet with a landowner or even us is there's no point, and it's extremely dangerous to just burn for no reason. The objective is the most important thing. If there's a better way to accomplish your objective than fire, then that's probably what you should do, because fire it is a great tool, and it's something that we use every day, but we have a lot of equipment and a lot of resources and highly qualified individuals. From a private landowner perspective, if you don't have the equipment to do it, then it's difficult, and that's where the prescribed burn manager comes in, and they can really take over and conduct the burn for you, and they know the proper condition, things like your relative humidity, and on the Jones, we don't burn, and this is, our burn boss does not like to do it if it's above 80 degrees, because at that point you start killing trees. So that would be kind of your maximum temperature, normally around 70 degrees. Now these are for maintenance burns on the Jones, just to knock back succession. You have some of the summertime burns where it can be 100 degrees outside, and you're trying to prepare a site to go in and plant new trees this year, and then it can be as hot as you want because you want to go in and kill everything on the site anyways. Relative humidities, usually they're down, less than 30% is our goal. And the main thing that we have to worry about is mixing height, which is basically the height that the smoke is going to travel before it disperses out. And at the Jones, we want one that's pretty high. You don't want it to just be a few hundred feet in the air, and that's going to put smoke on the roads and on the houses. So that's something that people have to consider. But for a private landowner, and there's a lot of guys that have experience out there burning, and they're fine to do it, because fire is a great tool if you're familiar with it and you know how to employ it. But anybody who's considering using fire, it is probably the cheapest brush management tool to use, but I would definitely recommend using a prescribed burn boss and hiring a private contractor if you haven't burned before.
That's an excellent opportunity there to involve a professional. The Texas Department of Agriculture has actually got a certification program for any individual out there that wants to go through this training and participate in helping landowners manage their property with fire. So we'll take a break here in just a moment and come back and talk a little bit about this and a few more things. You are listening to the Extension Hour on irlonestar.com.
At Jazzy Junk, volunteers reclaim, restore, and recycle. Jazzy Junk is a non-profit resale storefront where you will discover wonderful, unique finds at very affordable prices on furniture, antiques, books, art, home decor, and more. When you shop Jazzy Junk, you support New Danville, a community for adults with developmental disabilities. We receive new donations daily, so plan a visit to Jazzy Junk today to find that perfect item or gift. Our motto is here today, gone today. So remember to hurry in and shop often for the best selection. Jazzy Junk is located in the outlets at Conroe on League Line Road and I-45 North. Call 936-441-4500 or visit our website, jazzyjunk.org. That's JUNQUE for more information and store hours.
Tune in every Sunday night right here on Lone Star Internet Radio for adventure, romance, thrills, chills, and everything vintage radio drama can bring. The Players Theater Company Old Time Radio Hour comes to you every Sunday at 7 p.m. with brand new episodes monthly. Our productions always feature actors, music, and sound effects performed completely live. And now you can enjoy seeing each new episode performed on stage at the Owen Theater in Conroe. Check out www.irlonestar.com for information about upcoming episodes. Relive the glory days of vintage radio drama right here with the Players Theater Company Old Time Radio Hour on Lone Star Internet Radio.
The East Texas Dream Center is in need of your help. We are a nonprofit Christian organization that houses women and children who are trying to get their lives back after being homeless, abused, or addicted. We are conveniently located at 301 South 1st Street, Conroe, Texas, 77301, right here in Montgomery County. Our needs are financial and every needs of gasoline, cleaning supplies, laundry soap, Lysol, and whatever else God puts in your heart. To help our ladies and children, please consider a donation. You may visit our website at www.easttexasdreamcenter.org. Again, so you don't forget, it's www.easttexasdreamcenter.org. Donations are tax deductible. Remember what Jesus said, with God, nothing is impossible.
Alrighty, welcome back to the Toolbox. Again, today we're talking a little bit about fire and the management tool that it can provide. And this part of the country, it does. There's several opportunities there for a person to use some prescribed burn in pastures. And again, we're working with our local fire departments, regardless of the case. If we're going to plan something like this, and Ben, we were just talking a minute ago as far as the actual process of going through one and visiting with, we're hiring a burn boss or someone to help you line that thing out. But visiting with those fire departments and letting them know if you're going to touch something off and make sure they're aware of it, because you are going to get phone calls whenever we start something like this, and be aware of what's going on. And again, people, I guess, to think through this process. Again, they can use fire, not use fire. But when you get to looking at a piece of property there, and if we mentioned earlier, if it's got a high fuel load on it, and maybe you've got some invasive species like McCartney rose or some locusts and things like that, we got it's a planning process. We talked a little bit about that as far as going through in the future and we're going to be looking for a set of conditions. But then again, we need to make sure that there's a fuel load there. In many cases, if we got a situation in some of our western sides of the county that got a lot of McCartney rose, and it can be very invasive and take over a piece of property and basically render it, the access is gone off of it, places get so bad. So if we come in there with a herbicide treatment and, knock that back, but we would need to get that done early enough there so we can get some rainfall like we are right now, getting a little grass to grow underneath those bushes there, those dead canes, so that we can carry a fire. What kind of and again, I think most times in our part of the world right here, if we're looking at a pasture management burn, we're typically looking at late January, early February. We've got a little window in there where we can control some weeds, remove excess vegetation, and get that done before it starts to green right back up.
Yes, sir.
What do you see? What do you see as far as those kind of that window there, and how quick a window it typically is that most landowners are going to have an opportunity to get that done?
Right, and normally it's like you said, it is kind of towards the end of January when you start getting the conditions. It floods in East Texas in December, late November, December through January, and you have to have enough fuel, and the fuel has to have the right moisture content to be able to actually carry the fire. I mean, if it rained hard the day before and long, and the moisture really soaked into the ground, you're probably not going to be able to even get it to light. So, yeah, you do have a very brief window, usually from, like you mentioned, the end of January, and depending on weather conditions, you can burn into February or May for a maintenance burn, is like what you're talking about, with just kind of knocking back the successional stage of that pasture. But, there's other objectives, and we kind of touched on this earlier, and especially for some invasive species, there's a lot of fire research right now that shows high-intensity summer burns are actually doing a lot of good work on controlling woody vegetation like honey mesquite, and so it really depends on your objectives. If you've got a pasture that you want to it's taken over more of a shrubland with honey mesquite, and you want to convert it back to a pasture, and you're considering using fire as your only or primary management tool, that might be a situation where you would want to use burn on a hot summer day, as long as you can do it safely. But if you've got maybe just a couple of persimmons or something coming up in your pasture and you just want to kind of get rid of them, then yeah, that's definitely kind of a cool season burn where you just knock the persimmon back momentarily, and that those are, I guess, more frequent. But the other thing too is that fire is definitely, and we touched on this earlier, can be used in conjunction with herbicide especially. And if you look at vegetation return rates from only using fire on a treatment area or using a combination of herbicide and fire, you almost always have better results with woody species if you use herbicide and then followed up with a fire.
Whether it be a forested land or grazed land, in situations like that, that combination is going to be a very effective tool. And again, looking at the way to manage those fires, and again, this is a planning process to make sure that we're going to keep things in line. And when we're looking at the intensity of fires, how can we, you're talking a little bit of wind speed, humidity, things like that. What does a landowner need to be looking at? They may be visiting with a fire boss and someone helping them line something up to better understand. Are we looking at a 5-mile-an-hour wind? How, if we're going to have a cool fire, they may say a cool fire, a hot fire. On that cool fire, the humidity levels and the wind speed, how that we can make that what we call a cool fire and not be so destructive.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's actually guidelines that TCEQ puts in place where you're not allowed to do outdoor burning between, I believe it's 5 miles per hour and around 22, somewhere, maybe not those exact numbers, but 5 miles to 22, 23, and that's your range. So you definitely do not want to exceed the 22 miles an hour. And as your wind increases, your fire frequency, even if you're backing the fire into the wind, your fire frequency is going to increase. Especially the wind. Not only is it adding air to the fire, but it's also drying out plants as it's going through there. Other conditions is just temperature, and like I mentioned earlier, we don't burn when it gets above 80 degrees, but that's also because our burns, we're not trying to kill everything, we're just trying to knock the vegetation back.
Okay. And go ahead and explain to folks, and like I say, if we've got a piece of property, a pasture out there, 50 acres or so, and understand that process. We've got an idea about what our goals are, and understanding, when they hear about someone say what a backfire is, what a head fire is, flank fires, and how we, how those are utilized in combination to burn that pasture off in a quick fashion there, so it's kept controlled. We don't have lessen the chances of it escaping on us, and how those things are actually lit in combination to have a prescribed burn that completes a goal and gets the job done safely.
Sure. Well, I guess we'll start with a backfire, and what that is the wind is actually pushing into the fire so you don't really have as active of a flame front. The fire is actually backing into the wind slowly, and these are actually pretty good for brush management fires because it holds that heat and that intensity on the plant tissues for long enough that you can get a good kill. Compared to a head fire, and it's moving really quickly. It gets hot. They're significantly harder to control, but for a brush management standpoint, if you're doing a head fire in a cool season burn for a maintenance treatment, you might not get the same results compared to if you used them in the summertime for a high intensity burn. And one of the strategies that we use on the Jones is we actually run strip fires, and you actually light your initial backfire, and then you get out a little, usually about 66 feet, one chain in front of the fire, and you actually allow your fires to suck in and burn together. And so at that point, you have a backfire that's backing in, but then the two fires draw themselves together, so you have kind of a combination of a backfire and a head fire. And so you get a slower moving fire that's a little bit easier to maintain, but then you also get a little bit higher intensity that just sweeps through and controls the vegetation.
Gotcha. And again, this is all a tool, and it's a planning process, and people can become very proficient at doing this if a landowner wants to do his own property there. But there are some opportunities there across the country, and the Forest Service does not provide the training opportunities, but there are some professional schools out there that a person can attend to or participate in, become a certified burn specialist. And whether you're doing it yourself or if you want to be a person that's certified and able to go out there and actually utilize this as a form of profession or where the situation might be. But again, that certification process we mentioned earlier, that the Texas Department of Agriculture actually does a certification process, and they themselves don't teach the schools, but again, they've got the process there, the forms and applications, and the legal portion, the regulatory process of it, to make sure that a person is certified and is proficient in the fire training there, so that if they are contacted, and a person can feel comfortable with a burn boss that they are trying to find. And how would a person find a burn boss that they is there kind of a resource there we go to if an individual wanted to find somebody?
Sure, absolutely. And any time that you're considering any kind of fire on the landscape, the Texas A&M Forest Service, we're more than willing to help you. We no longer burn on private lands, but we'll help you find somebody. And I have a list in my office of all the burn vendors in the state of Texas. So they can contact me, and we can even go out and look at the property and kind of assess it and see, maybe what your best option is. Because fire, it's a great option. I love it. I think that it needs to have more interaction with the landscape and be used more frequently. Mm-hmm. But, it's not always the best option or the only option. Sometimes you might not be able to put fire on the landscape, but so you can contact us, and we'll go look at your land and discuss your objectives with you and help you figure out what you need to do, and then help you to get in contact with a prescribed burn vendor.
Yeah. And again, we ask that if you're going to go this process or try to do it yourself, visit with somebody, contact the Forest Service and help them get with you, because you may feel comfortable enough that you've seen it done and want to manage your own fire, but that burn plan is critical, that it's written out, and we know exactly what needs to be done and what resources need to be available on hand. Because we've got a little water truck or 2-gallon pump up sprayers. When a situation comes, that may not be near enough resources to have on hand. Do we still have some fire retardants available to us that say if we're just trying to got some tall grass there and don't have the chance to get a dozer in there to scrape some soil back and expose some soil, that actually can be sprayed on some of these plants there to just give us that little break there, the fire can come up to it and stop that from burning through that material?
Sure, and there's companies such as Foscheck, for example, that has products like this that are available to the public. As far as an agency, we do provide fire departments, volunteer and paid departments with things, and it's actually called Fire Quench. But we really don't offer them to the public. It's mainly just part of our partnership with these fire departments. And they do the same thing, and it's really just a foam that allows the plants to absorb more moisture, and it keeps them from drying out as quickly compared to when you get a fire putting heat on them. But yeah, there's a few companies, and Foscheck is the only one that comes to mind. But there are several companies that offer products that are available to the public.
That is a neat tool. We've done some burning, and like I said, just had that fires coming to it and spray it a little bit there, and all of a sudden fire comes up there and quits, and it's done. And that's a neat thing. And it's just one of those opportunities we need to be available for. Okay, we'll take one more break here, and then we'll come back after another ad and finish up for the day. You are listening to the Extension Hour with Texas A&M AgriLife. Visit us online at montgomery.agrilife.org.
At Jazzy Junk, volunteers reclaim, restore, and recycle. Jazzy Junk is a non-profit resale storefront where you will discover wonderful, unique finds at very affordable prices on furniture, antiques, books, art, home decor, and more. When you shop Jazzy Junk, you support New Danville, a community for adults with developmental disabilities. We receive new donations daily, so plan a visit to Jazzy Junk today to find that perfect item or gift. Our motto is here today, gone today. So remember to hurry in and shop often for the best selection. Jazzy Junk is located in the outlets at Conroe on League Line Road and I-45 North. Call 936-441-4500 or visit our website, jazzyjunk.org. That's JUNQUE for more information and store hours.
Hello, I'm Bonita DeRosa, Animal Control Officer for the City of Willis. We invite you to tune in to Lone Star Internet Radio every first and third Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. for the Willis Hour. On the first Thursday of the month, the Willis Hour will be covering upcoming events and news about the city. Join in the conversation with your city officials and other leaders in the community. On the third, we will be doing a recap of the last City Council meeting. The mission of the City of Willis is to provide high-quality services, accountability, and professional commitment to our citizens. We pledge to provide those who live, work, and visit our city an effective government that is open and responsive to the needs and values of the community. Again, we invite you to tune in on Lone Star Internet Radio every first and third Thursday of the month at 11 for the Willis Hour.
Hi, this is Erica Tullis, Executive Director of the Breast Cancer Charities of America. The Breast Cancer Charities of America is a national nonprofit organization with our headquarters in The Woodlands, Texas. We focus on non-invasive breast cancer research and helping the true patient that is going through breast cancer. Through our Help Now Fund, we help women pay the rent and utilities while going through their breast cancer treatment. It's unlike any other program that truly is out there. We are here to help the woman. Our phone number is 936-231-8460. For more information or to get involved or to even make a donation, please visit our website, www.igopink.org.
Alrighty, welcome back to the Toolbox, and again, we've been visiting about some land management tools, particularly some mechanical work, but also fire. It can be a destructive activity, as you're seeing in the news across the country, and again, it can be a very valuable management tool. And we've talked a little bit about managing existing vegetation, and also Ben has talked a little bit as far as summer fires can be destructive. We're actually removing habitat, and persons may change their mind as far as how they want to manage a piece of property and where their direction is. There's a lot of clearing going on, and maybe it was going to be cleared and going to be developed, and then all of a sudden that landowner decides to change their mind and wants to come back with a stand of trees. So again, replanting and establishing a woods piece of property back in timber. Again, there's a natural vegetation process that goes on, but most people try to quicken the story a little bit and actually replant. So they'll pick a species, and then also there's ways of securing those seedlings. So Ben, if you talk a little bit about as far as if I've got a landowner that comes to you, and all of a sudden they want to plant 50 acres worth of trees, what kind of process do we want to go through as far as species selection, and then also where were they going to find those trees?
Well, the first thing with species selection is it just depends on the landowner. And I'm a believer in diversity, but loblolly pine is one of the most accessible species, and it's native and adapted to the site. So, a loblolly pine plantation is always kind of the sure thing to go to. Now, that's not saying that there's not other options. It's just you probably get the best bang for your buck in that, and your return is quicker if you're looking at selling timber for commercial value. There are some hardwood options, and we use the same vendor to purchase hardwood. But it's not as common. Loblolly pine is really kind of the king here in Southeast Texas. And so I guess the way to kick that off is you could contact me here in the Texas A&M Forest Service Conroe District Office, and we'll set up a meeting time, and we'll go out and look at your property and just discuss your objectives and what you want to plant. And, one of the most important things is the site prep. And how you prepare the site. The better chopped up that you've got the soil and the vegetation removed, the higher chance of survival that you have for the seedling. So there's a lot of mechanical treatments that you go in and push and pile some of the slash, or herbicide treatments and things like that. And after we talk about site prep, then we'll get into the seedlings, and there's a variety of seedlings out there. Even with loblolly pine, you have hundreds and hundreds of types of seedlings that they just vary. You have ones that grow tall, fast, and straight, or there's just so many different genetic properties that these trees have, and all of them cost a little bit. Some are more and some are less, and so you just kind of find whichever one suits you, whatever you want, and I'll help you select that, and I've got a catalog that we can go through, and then you place your seed order. You can do it through me, or you can contact the company directly, and we generally use ArborGen. It's an excellent company that has done a lot of genetic research, not genetically modifying the trees, but just selectively breeding for traits over the years, and they have a lot of different options. And, it's best if you can place your order as early as possible, usually around August, September, maybe even July, and contact me or contact Arborgen and place your order. And then your pickup time is usually sometime in the winter, maybe December, January. And that's going to be kind of your ideal planting window, usually January through the end of March or April, depending on the conditions.
Mm-hmm. And then the planting process, is that is that a crew type thing, or I mean, as far as there are opportunities out there, as far as hiring somebody to come in, because getting those guys in the ground, those bare roots in the ground properly, and not bending or J rooting those plants so that we lose those trees. What kind of a process does a person need to plan on, and amount of labor? If they've got several acres to plant, it's not something they can knock out in an afternoon.
No, absolutely not. And the way to go about it is just so dependent on what you have there on the site. If you've got just 1 acre and you want to do it yourself, then I can even help you loan the tools for you to do it with a dibble bar, and you can go plant some of your seedlings by hand. And it all just depends on your objectives. If you've got hundreds of acres, it definitely needs to be machine planted. It's just you have a better chance of survival because you probably, if your machine is adjusted right, you don't have to worry about things like J rooting so bad, and it's just so much faster. And for mechanical planting or for hand planting too, there's a lot of vendors that offer hand planting as well. But for the large scale and small scale, you can contact me if you're looking at hiring somebody to do it, and the same as contacting a burn vendor earlier. I've got a list of all the tree planters in the state of Texas, and that would be willing to work with you, and you can give them a call and find one that you trust. If you're looking at doing it yourself, you can always contact me and come by the office, or I'll meet you on your property, and we'll try to discuss some of the things, and I'll try to guide you through the process. Now, I might not be able to stay out there and plant trees with you all day. I don't know if
we're
anybody.
Here, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I would want to do that anyways. But no, we'll definitely help you in any way that we can, whether it's with finding somebody to do it for you or educating you and maybe giving you a hand to plant the trees on your property.
Sure. Yeah, it's a process, and again, the idea being that this is planning. We talked about you've got some goal setting, and you set a time schedule there and parameters that got to be right for doing a burn and doing that initial work, and the same thing on securing plants. It's not something you run out to Christmas weekend and say, well, I guess I'm going to go ahead and plant trees. You've got to look at several months ahead of time, looking at the number of acres you want to try to plant, the plant density, and figure out how many plants we need to order. And that, like I said, that needs to be done late summer there and securing those trees, because these companies are producing product, and if they're hung with a lot of product not sold at the end of the season, they're losing money. So they're going to provide production is going to be geared towards orders and providing those. I think at one time, Forest Service did have their own nursery, right, over there in East Texas.
Yes, sir. We've actually had several nurseries, and we still have one now in Idalou, and it's more kind of internal, and we still purchase trees from Arborgen or from other private companies. But yeah, the Forest Service for a long time sold trees to a lot of landowners, and those have just kind of the agency has changed, I guess, over time, and we've just adapted to fit the needs of a changing society. So the nurseries aren't as big of a part with the agency as it used to be, but that is a big part of our history, is growing trees and developing trees to suit changing climates and things like that.
So if I'm going to contact somebody, if I'm looking for some, say, sawtooth oaks, and if finding somebody in Georgia that might be producing them, do I feel comfortable in those trees coming from Georgia over here and planting them in Southeast Texas?
I think it's always better if you hire, or if you buy from somewhere local. Now, if you just get depending on the size of the nursery, if you go with a worldwide company, then they can probably get trees there on that side, even if it's in Georgia, that are adapted to Texas. Mm-hmm. So that's just something that you have to look at. You want to try to purchase varieties of trees that are within your area. Now, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to purchase from in your area. More than likely, the trees that you purchase in your area are going to be more adapted to that site, but not necessarily. I would say in general, you should probably purchase more local, but there are some kind of odd circumstances, I guess, that might not dictate that.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the take-home message is there are plants that are adapted to this area, and just because you've seen or read about something that magazine or an article or something like that, this is a great variety. Is it adapted to this area? and what kind of soils it was raised in, so it's adapted to our area. Because we've got a tremendous variety of soils in Montgomery County, and that's one thing we talked about in the past is soil types, 50 different soil types ranging from extremely acid to very alkaline, and finding plant material there that's going to be adapted to those is going to be tough. So again, we've had a good time here talking about fire and things like that. I want to throw one other thing in right quick that we're getting some calls on, and again, the dry weather has driven this, but sure, a lot of scorpions that are showing up in folks' houses the last few days. And again, they call them insects, but they are truly arachnids. They're in that family with lice and spiders and things like that. But again, they're not out there looking for people. They're looking for some moisture in these dry conditions, and hopefully it'll lessen the possibility of getting in homes and bothering people. They've got very poor vision. They work off of motion and things like that, so they're not hunting somebody. So again, like we talked about, fire cleaning up is going to be a critical thing. Sealing up your home, stopping those cracks so they can't get in the house. That's the best way to prevent insects from getting in there. And begin a scorpion bite in the middle of the night is very uncomfortable when you're trying to avoid those things. So be aware of your surroundings, and whether it be fire or an insect, or an arachnid, I should say, keep them going. So again, we appreciate you being with us today on the Toolbox, and we'll talk to you next time.